Yes or no, the money or the bag?
I think I'll take the money and the bag. Thanks, Owen.
Yeah, very clever, money in the bag. So to explain what bonus bonds are or were, David Boyle from Mint Asset Management, formerly with the Commission for Financial Capability, to round out our show. David, welcome.
How's it going?
Good. I believe you started your career at the post office when you were 17, Ashburton. You sold bonus bonds then.
I did, crikey, that's showing my age, isn't it? But yeah, that's where I started in my walk shorts and knit tie. And yeah, I mean, bonus bonds were quite a big thing when I was working there in the 80s. And remembering interest rates in those days, those early periods, were 3% in a post office savings bank account. A lot of people wanted something a bit more fun. The fund's kind of gone out of bonus bonds over the years, though, so there's not a lot of bonus left in them.
OK, let's go to the panel. Victoria, bonus bonds, did you have any? Have you had any?
I still have some. My grandparents used to give them to me. I think they thought it was a great way to get me to save and know the money wouldn't be spent. I'm not going to be able to retire on it, though.
Guy?
I don't know what they are, and I don't know what we're talking about.
No, so to that, because a lot of people don't when I ask David. Give us an explainer. What are they?
Well, essentially they were an opportunity where investors could put money into a bond and come up for a monthly prize. There's $3.3 billion of New Zealanders' money just sitting there, and each month they had a chance to win up to $1 million. But the value of that return is really diminished, and consequently that's why ANZ's got to the stage where they probably couldn't make a lot more money out of it, and might have been actually creating a bit of a risk given the very low interest rates and negative returns perhaps that could be coming up in the financial year.
Were they a good idea?
Look, at the time they were probably the safest way to gamble for those that didn't really want to risk any capital. But the thing that they're doing is now is really missing out on investment returns in the market or anywhere else with a diminishing return that was being provided by the number of prizes that ANZ could provide. And they were government guaranteed in the old days, so the money was safe. It's not to say that it's not safe now, but when the fund gets wound up, it's going to be closed and locked in, and those investors will need to may need to wait at least a year before they get their money out.
Victoria?
And I was just going to ask, because also I understand it's not interest-bearing, so if I bought $50 worth of bonds in 1975, I get $50 back, which is not a very good return.
You're absolutely right. That $50, if you could think of what you could buy back in those days and what you get now, would be phenomenally different. So you're right, no interest rate. That was the downside and has been for a long time. And yeah, probably seen it's a bit sad seeing a little bit of Kiwiana disappearing. Yeah. But I think they've had their day, and there are far better investment opportunities out there than perhaps this.
All right, good on you, David Boyle there from Mint Asset Management. And to Guy Williams and Victoria Carter, Stuart rather, thank you very much for being with us. You've been wonderful. Bit of an Auckland versus Wellington stoush today, and people are piling on in there, so I appreciate you for racking up the country on that. Have a great weekend, both of you.
You too.
I'm Wallace Chapman. See you Monday, 3:45, and have a lovely, lovely weekend. See you.
Mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, it's Groundhog Day as the NZX is taken down again by cyber attacks. Now the big guns are being rolled out. The government digs its toes in over millions of dollars of funding for a green school that has many seeing red. Auckland, the countdown to alert level 2 is on, but the Finance Minister warns the job's not quite done. COVID's brought many businesses to their knees, but one holiday spot's found in Upside. We head to the Coromandel. NZ Blood is stockpiling plasma from recovered coronavirus patients, so who's it going to be used for? And no way is COVID going to squash one man's gardening ambitions. Behold the giant pumpkin.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata with DNA. Trading on the New Zealand Stock Exchange finished for the week after a tumultuous 4 days marred by cyber attacks and scant information about who's behind it. The attacks have raised questions over the country's security systems. Emma Hatton reports.
It began on Tuesday with trading disrupted for an hour at the end of the day, the NZX citing connectivity issues as the problem. However, over the next 3 days, it became clear it was a cyber attack, which took out trading for most of that time. There's little clarity on who is behind the attacks, which overload the website and market announcement platform, with the government simply saying it was taking it very seriously and that the Gcsp was involved. The NZX has neither confirmed nor denied if attackers have made any demands. This is Emma Hatton.
The Finance Minister says Auckland will move to Level 2 on Sunday night, but to do so safely, people need to get tested. Grant Robertson says pop-up testing centres have been set up across the region.
If you have any cold or flu-like symptoms at all, or are in any way connected to, for example, the Mount Roskill Evangelical Church or Mount Albert Grammar School, we need you to get tested today or this weekend.
The move to Level 2 comes with added restrictions in Auckland, including funeral and tangihanga being limited to 50 people and church services and celebrations to 10. Hospitality will be able to accept up to 100 customers, but in groups no bigger than 10. 5 of today's 12 new COVID-19 cases are linked to the Auckland cluster. The Ministry of Health says 4 of the community cases are from one household and are linked to the Mount Roskill Evangelical Church subcluster. The other case is epidemiologically linked to a confirmed case which has been genomically linked to the community cluster. The 7 further new cases are imported. The man convicted of the March 15th mosque attacks wanted to avoid appearing in person at his sentencing. Terrorist and mass murderer Brenton Tarrant will spend the rest of his life behind bars after he was sentenced yesterday for killing 51 people and injuring 40 at the Al Noor and Linwood mosques last year. Rachel Graham reports.
Court documents, which were suppressed until the end of the sentencing, showed Tarrant applied to appear at his sentencing by audio-visual link. His counsel said it would be cost-saving and avoid the need for secure transfer from Auckland to Christchurch. The Crown opposed the request, saying the sentencing was of greater importance to the victims as it was now the focal point of the criminal proceedings. In declining the request, Justice Cameron Mander said it might have been an attempt by the killer to avoid being held publicly accountable for his offences. This is Rachel Graham.
The Green Party co-leader James Shaw maintains the decision to put nearly $12 million of public money into a privately owned green school in Tauranga was made for good reasons. Mr Shaw, who was also Associate Finance Minister, is under increasing pressure from within his own party over the deal. He says he understands why state schools waiting for repairs feel disappointed, but that's a separate issue.
This is a construction project in the Tauranga region that scored well, that is supported by the local council, not just for the short-term jobs it creates in the construction sector, but also an economic development project in a part of the country that's having to think about a future beyond oil and gas.
James Shaw says it was a budget decision. The Finance Minister says the money is being spent on a construction project which is entirely different to funding the operation of schools. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. All international rugby league matches for the Kiwis this year have been cancelled. New Zealand Rugby League had plans for games against Australia and Tonga, but Chief Executive Greg Peters says aside from the travel challenges associated with COVID-19, there was concerns about player welfare following an extended NRL season. Peters says the next time the Kiwis will take the field is likely to be June next year, with the Rugby League World Cup scheduled for October next year in England.
There's no point in a lead-up year to what is going to be a massive year next year to just play a test match. Just not feasible to be able to expect people to quarantine for a month in total for a one-week campaign. A, it's costly, and B, it's not realistic on the people themselves.
Greg Peters. A host of US sports were postponed for a second straight day in protest at the shooting of Jacob Blake. The NBA postponed today's playoff games after yesterday's fixtures were called off following a player walkout. The playoffs are set to resume over the weekend. The women's NBA also postponed matches, and for the second straight night, Major League Baseball games and ice hockey's NHL matches were pushed back. Meanwhile, Japanese tennis player Naomi Osaka has decided to play her semi-final at the latest WTA event in New York after previously saying she would withdraw from the match. And Canterbury have trounced North Otago 71-7 to retain the Ranfurly Shield at Rugby Park in Christchurch this afternoon. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, a new approach to cancer. Kat Arney on using evolution and adaptive therapy. Devo frontman Mark Mothersbaugh on his career writing scores for television and movies, including for Taika Waititi, and Harvard professor David Williams on how racism makes us sick. He says it's not only because of socioeconomic status. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Tomorrow, Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Partly cloudy, a few showers in Northland. Generally fine elsewhere with the odd shower at times, especially tomorrow afternoon. Waikato to Taranaki, including Taupo, cloudy periods and showers. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, fine spells and isolated showers. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha. Fine weather with high cloud at times, norwesterly gales in exposed places tomorrow for Canterbury. Southland and Clutha, high cloud increasing, then rain tonight, a few showers tomorrow and westerly gales in exposed places. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers, heavy in Fiordland tonight and overnight. In Chatham Islands, fine spells and the odd shower. RNZ National. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, the stoush over the amount of green being pumped into an eco school ramps up as James Shaw prepares to face party members over his call to support the funding. But first, the government has pulled in the heavyweights to investigate attacks on the NZX. The stock exchange has been the victim of attacks for 4 days in a row. Its website has been brought to its knees and as a result, trading was yet again halted today. The Gcsp has been called in, but ministers are staying tight-lipped on the action they're taking. Tom Kitchen reports.
For the 4th time in as many days, trading was halted. Unexpected attacks daily and uncertainty in the market. All brought on by a distributed denial of service or DDoS attack, overwhelming the NZX website with a flood of traffic. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the government's Communication Security Bureau, the Gcsp, is looking into it.
Ministers have asked the Gcsp to assist, and the National Cyber Security Centre within the Gcsp are assisting NZX.
But he can't say what it's actually doing.
There are limits to what I can say today about the action the government is taking behind the scenes due to significant security considerations.
Mr Robertson says the national security system has been activated so agencies can coordinate well together. The source of the attack hasn't been officially identified. ZDNet, an American technology website, says similar cyber attacks happened around the world over the past couple of weeks, but the NZX seemed to be among the worst affected. Other financial service companies affected have been global payments company PayPal and money transfer companies Braintree and WorldPay. The article names the groups involved as Armada Collective and Fancy Bear, which it says were sending ransom letters to companies in finance, travel and e-commerce. The NZX won't say if it has received ransom demands. AUT computer science professor Dave Parry says NZX and its internet provider Spark will be beefing up security.
So very much like if your house gets burgled 3 times, then you might put more security on than you'd normally want to. It'll cost you money. It might be inconvenient. So you don't want to do that unless you have to. But if that's your world, then maybe you have to start thinking that way.
Technology expert Peter Griffin says the community has questions about Spark's security measures.
From what I've seen in the security community, there's some suggestion that the way that Spark and the NZX have architected how traffic comes to the servers hasn't been very good.
Experts say nothing critical has been destroyed and nobody's lost any data, but plenty of questions about how and why it's happening linger. For Checkpoint, Tom Kitchen.
The government is refusing to back down on a controversial decision to put nearly $12 million into a privately owned green school in Taranaki. Green Party co-leader James Shaw, who championed the proposal in the first place, was this afternoon fronting up to his caucus colleagues, many of whom were blindsided by the announcement. Ruth Hill reports.
The announcement that the Green School in Oakura, which charges $40,000 a year for overseas students, is getting an $11.7 million government handout for its building project, is not winning many votes on the streets of New Plymouth.
The funds should be spread equally among the schools.
For a private organisation like that to just come along and get $11.7 million, it doesn't sound right to me.
I think it should go to the other schools, not private schools.
I think it stinks when public schools are struggling to raise enough money for the simple things.
Why the people that can actually afford to pay for things like that, why do they get the handout?
Split that equally amongst the province and then a lot more kids will benefit from it.
Principals of state schools in Taranaki say more cash to fix their dilapidated classrooms is desperately needed. However, the government says the expansion of the Green School, which opened in February, will bring 200 jobs to the region and pump $43 million into the local economy annually. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the government won't be backtracking. He says the money is being spent on a construction project, which is entirely different to funding the operation of schools.
I can understand that there are people who perhaps don't like it or would rather the decision was changed, but I think the government's got to act in good faith here with an applicant.
The project, which comes under the government's suite of shovel-ready projects to boost the recovery from COVID-19, was promoted by Associate Finance Minister James Shaw, the Green Party co-leader. He admits it was meant to be a good news story, but it hasn't quite panned out that way, and he's getting flack from his own party for supporting public investment in a private school. I asked him whether he would try to reverse the decision if his caucus asks him to do so.
So it was a budget minister's decision, and I haven't spoken to budget ministers about that.
You would be open to changing your mind, or you say the decision's been made? It was
the decision has been made. It was a budget decision. It is part of an enormous package of projects.
How come your own education spokesperson didn't know about this project before it was on the table?
Because it's under budget secrecy, and we're actually not able. Ministers aren't able to share projects with their wider caucuses in advance of budget decisions.
Mr Shaw maintains it was a good decision made for good reasons, and it will benefit the region and has strong support from council. He says, however, he understands why locals waiting for their schools to be fixed feel disappointed. The government has put $2 billion aside for that purpose, but it will take time to do the work. Meanwhile, James Shaw received support from an unlikely quarter today, National MP Nicola Willis, who shoehorned herself into the small media scrum. She says Education Minister Chris Hipkins should have been asking questions when the decision was discussed.
It's not fair. Actually, it shouldn't all sit on James Shaw's shoulders, and those Labor ministers need to take some responsibility. As does Shane Jones, who also gave a grant to the Green School for a whole bunch of trees. And I don't see anyone asking him questions about it.
The head of the Taranaki Chamber of Commerce, Arun Charari, says it wouldn't be fair on local schools if they missed out on funding, but this is a project that is going to benefit the whole region.
No doubt it is elitist, there's no denying that, but hey, there's a market for everything, and I think they do also look at students who might be deprived of that kind of funding at home. So, yeah, I think overall it's a great idea.
Meanwhile, James Shaw said he was looking forward to a robust kōrero with his fellow Green MPs today and the chance to explain the reasons for the decision in person rather than through the media. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
No one from the Green School was available to be interviewed this afternoon, but in a written statement, its Chief Executive, Chris Edwards, said he wanted to highlight the fact that the government has yet to confirm the exact details of the funding mix that will be received. He said at the time of the application in April, Green School applied for a mix of both concessionary loans and a grant, not a full grant. And Checkpoint also requested an interview with James Shaw, but he declined. It is 14 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that one. Do you agree with a private school getting about $12 million worth of funding, or would it be better served going into state schools? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. We're nearly there, but the job is not quite done. That's according to the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, who says Auckland will leave COVID Alert Level 3 on Sunday night, despite another 5 cases of community transmission reported today. There are also another 7 cases which have been detected in managed isolation. Here's our political reporter, Charlie Drever.
It was no easy feat, but Aucklanders have done their bit to help contain the country's biggest COVID-19 cluster to date. Finance Minister Grant Robertson has thanked them for helping fight the virus's spread.
Over the past few weeks, you have been tested in record numbers, stayed home to stop the spread, and supported those communities most affected. As a result of your actions, New Zealand remains in a comparatively positive position to other countries who have experienced second wave outbreaks, with a small number of daily cases, no additional cases and no spread of the virus beyond the cluster.
But he says there is still work to do over the weekend.
The first is to get a test. If you have any cold or flu-like symptoms at all, or are in any way connected to, for example, the Mount Roskill Evangelical Church or Mount Albert Grammar School, we need you to get tested today or this weekend. I also need to remind Aucklanders that restrictions do still apply until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday evening. We've done a great job. We're almost there. Let's finish the job.
The Director of Public Health, Dr Caroline McElnay, says the 5 community cases confirmed today are all linked to the Auckland cluster.
4 of the cases are from one household and are linked to the Mount Roskill Evangelical Church subcluster. The other case is epidemiologically linked to a known other confirmed case not part of the Mount Roskill cluster.
The 7 imported cases all arrived on the same flight on the 23rd of August and tested positive on their day 3 tests. There are 160 people linked to the community cluster who have been transferred to the Auckland quarantine facility. Dr McElnay says 11 other people remain in hospital with the virus.
3 are in Auckland City, 4 in Middlemore, 3 in North Shore and 1 in Waikato. 8 people are on a ward and 3 are in ICU, 1 each in Middlemore, North Shore and Waikato Hospital.
7 people have now recovered, leaving the number of active cases at 130. Meanwhile, more than 11,000 tests were processed yesterday. Dr McElnay says she was confident the target of 70,000 tests in a week will be achieved.
Certainly yesterday's figures, 11,000. The day before that, I think, was 10,000. So if we can maintain it at that level, then we're confident that we'll get to the 70,000.
From Monday, Auckland venues such as museums, libraries and cinemas can reopen. Under Level 2, bars and restaurants can offer seated service to up to 100 people, with groups of 10 or fewer. Social gatherings will be limited to 10 people, with the exception of tangihanga and funerals, which are capped at 50. Public transport must display QR codes, and don't forget the mask. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Ko Charlie Drever, DNA.
More than 156,000 jobs are being supported by the latest round of the wage subsidy scheme, and businesses say it's a desperately needed lifeline to get them through a second lockdown. The so-called resurgence wage subsidy opened for applications a week ago for businesses across the country struggling financially because of the Level 3 restrictions in Auckland. So far, more than $167 million has been paid out, but the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, expects that figure to grow. Here's our social issues reporter, Sarah Robson.
Rotorua Canopy Tours promises to take visitors on the adventure of a lifetime, exploring a prehistoric native forest on a network of zip lines, swing bridges, cliff walks and treetop platforms. Like countless other tourism businesses, General Manager Paul Button says it's been tough going without any international visitors. After the busy July school holidays, Mr Button says visitor numbers were already dropping off, even before the Alert Level 3 restrictions were announced in Auckland.
Business levels were really low post-school holidays anyway, and what it did, the market was just a bit of a dribble, and then what it did essentially turned the tap off. I don't know, just to throw numbers out there, our payroll was bigger than our revenue.
He says they applied for the new 2-week wage subsidy straight away.
we're going backwards. We're going backwards a lot, and it just kind of eases the pain a little bit.
But Paul Button says this lockdown hasn't been as stressful as the last one.
We've restructured to the point where our team is a lot smaller, and we knew that everybody's going to have jobs at the end of it. The wage subsidy wasn't about who you're going to keep and who you're not going to keep. It was just softening the blow, ensure you don't go as far backwards as you were going to.
To be eligible for the resurgence wage subsidy, businesses must have experienced a 40% drop in revenue over a 2-week period between August the 12th and September the 10th. New figures show that more than $167 million has been paid out to almost 47,000 businesses, supporting close to 157,000 jobs. Auckland restaurateur Krishna Bodhika has sent in her application to cover 65 staff working across 3 eateries, Cafe Hanoi, Shushu Dumpling Bar and San. She says before the latest lockdown, they'd been on track for a good August, with Restaurant Month bringing in plenty of bookings. Instead, they're back to takeaway pickups and deliveries.
We can pay our rent. With the wage subsidy, we can pay our staff. And we're not going backwards, but we're not going anywhere either. We're not going forwards either.
Without that help, Krishna Bodhika says there would be no future for her restaurants.
We were up to date with our bills, but without the wage subsidy, our wages just blow out completely. Yeah, that would be a very, very quick demise.
The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, expects more businesses will end up applying for the new wage subsidy in the coming weeks. He says others may also find they are now eligible for the earlier 8-week wage subsidy extension, which is open until September the 1st. Meanwhile, new figures from the Ministry of Social Development show there hasn't been a big spike in people going on to the benefit or COVID income relief payment as wage subsidy payments have ended. Mr Robertson says between August the 5th and 21st, more than 325,000 jobs came off the wage subsidy. In that same period, just over 6,000 people went on to income support.
And I think what that reflects is businesses have been adjusting. We did see that very strong period for the economy through late June and into July. And so, it's a good sign for the economy, but I also don't want to diminish the experience of those more than 6,000 people who have moved on to income support. It's tough for them.
At the moment, almost 338,000 jobs are being supported by the various wage subsidy schemes. All up, the government has paid out more than $13.4 billion in wage subsidies to support more than 1.7 million jobs. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
While many businesses around the country are taking a battering because of COVID-19, a real estate agent in the Coromandel Peninsula is enjoying his best August in 5 years. The Coromandel is benefiting from people being forced to give up on the idea of an overseas holiday and take their break closer to home. While Auckland's lockdown has been a hiccup for some businesses relying on the passing cars, for others it's provided an unexpected bonus. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Simon Rogers hit the road to see how they're all getting on.
On the main drag in Thames, car parks are hard to come by.
It's been busy, really busy, in some cases nuts.
Business in the town has been booming, and Megan Guthrie, the owner of Needles and Pins sewing shop, says Aucklanders who rushed south before lockdown have helped keep sales up.
There are more. The night that the government announced the lockdown, the traffic on the coast increased exponentially. It woke me up. Yeah, it was really noticeable. And then that morning before the 12 o'clock when they were going to put barricades up, there were people here shopping. You know, the batches that are empty, and then there's cars there and there's lights on and, people outside and,
Holidaying Aucklanders make up a massive part of the Coromandel economy, and while the latest lockdown has been hard, Andrea Johnson of Taidawa's Manaya Kitchen and Bar says it's been a stunner of a winter.
We have been really busy, really busy, way up from last year. The weather hasn't been that bad, and it's just been really good. And a lot of people coming here because they can't go overseas. They finish work on a Friday, they get in their car and come and enjoy their holiday homes that they really only come to sort of in summertime, but they're like, why not? Let's go to the beach in winter.
Wage subsidies have gone a long way in helping businesses. Andrea says it's been a quiet few weeks, but they're in a good position to deal with it.
The morale's been pretty good, better than previous years, because we do get really quiet in winter. And everybody has been really enjoying the buzz of more people here in winter, and we have all been doing good. And I never open every day, 7 days over winter. This year I've been able to. We can cope with this drop in revenue, we're okay, but we do, as soon as we can get back to normal, we are looking forward to that.
Andrew Gibson is the manager of Richardson's real estate in Tauranga. He says after the last lockdown lifted, the whole area was humming.
And it was almost like an Easter weekend every weekend, which was great to see.
Many of those visitors don't want to leave again, and if you don't need to be in the office full time anymore, Coromandel is the place to be.
It's been a great month this month. We were sort of building up to it. It is the best month in the last year for us in Richardson's Tauranga, and I would say it's my best August since 2015, when things really started to pick up here after the global financial crisis.
But Andrew Gibson's under no illusions about how vulnerable businesses are if Auckland gets shut off again.
We are doing well, and we all support each other. We're very much a community. All our little towns have their own community and support networks, and I think we've weathered it quite well. But like I say, I wouldn't like to see it continue.
That vulnerability is evident on the drive south from Auckland, where cafes are shut and closed signs have replaced the hordes of hungry holiday makers.
So when the highway stops, it's game over for us. Shut the door and go and do something else for a while.
Terry Peachy owns the Native Tree Cafe in Mangatarata, just off State Highway 27. While his business is shut until Sunday, he's optimistic about life in Auckland's Level 2.
So I've had the opportunity to take on the lease of another cafe in the area, and it's kind of like a low investment opportunity. I don't have to put a lot of money into it, but I figure that it will help us regain the loss that we've had, the 25% loss that we've had in turnover. We can probably pick that up plus a little bit more, which will make me, give me the ability to keep all my staff. Just try to stay positive, and I don't like to listen to the whingers too much. I turn them off.
The Thames Coromandel Mayor Sandra Gowdy says there's been a definite spending drop-off during Auckland's lockdown, but it could be a lot worse.
Well, we're about 80 to 87% of our visitor market is domestic. So we're quite fortunate that, yes, there are certain areas of businesses that rely on the overseas market, and they've suffered and we've lost some as a result, which is really tragic for us and for them. It's a very difficult time for many businesses, and we just supported that little bit extra by being such a strong domestic market.
And while out-of-towners are welcomed on the whole, she says there has been some animosity from locals.
Sadly, there has been on occasion, and I think that's completely unwarranted and unnecessary if everybody just focuses on themselves and what they can do. And most people, they take it seriously, they act responsibly, and they want to do the right thing. So I think it's worked pretty well. And for people that do come here from Auckland, they're coming from their home, which is their bubble, they hop into their vehicle, which is their bubble, and then they go to another home in our district, which is also their home, and it's another bubble. So, and they act responsibly, and so I don't think they should be treated with disrespect. People that come and visit us, we embrace you wholeheartedly.
With Auckland's planned shift to Level 2, those visitors could be back as soon as Monday, ready to boost business and keep the Coromandel humming. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin says he has a police force ready to move into Belarus. There have been weeks of unrest in Belarus following an election many believe was rigged. More protests are expected this weekend. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg filed this report from the hometown of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko.
A country consumed by protests still needs to work the land. The district of Shklov. It's famous for two things. Its cucumbers, which have their own statue, and the president. Alexander Lukashenko grew up near here and ran a local farm in communist days. He's exhibit number 1 in the museum. Alexander Grudina has known Mr. Lukashenko for 40 years.
He was physically strong, and he got angry very easily. But when he was younger and a Democrat, we liked him. He was progressive. He's completely changed.
But we did find some support here for the president at the annual Shklov Teacher Conference.
I just don't understand what kind of bright future those protesters are fighting for. Life's okay now. We are pleased with what the president's doing.
For the 26 years he's been president, Alexander Lukashenko has cultivated the image not only of strongman, but the only man who can rule Belarus. It's as if Lukashenko and the land are one and the same. So, any attempt to uproot him from power, he presents as a direct threat to the nation. Today, Mr. Lukashenko said a hybrid war was being waged against his country. He's accused the West of plotting a coup against him. And here's his reaction. Riot police detained protesters in the centre of Minsk today. Media, too. We were among dozens of journalists taken to a police station for a 2-hour document check. In Shklov, they say Alexander Lukashenko ran his farm with an iron fist. He continues trying to do the same with his country.
That report from the BBC's Steve Rosenberg. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, NZ Blood stockpiles plasma from recovered COVID-19 patients so it can be used in international clinical trials. Meanwhile, France sees a surge in the number of infections there and national pledges to keep the TY Point smelter running for at least 5 more years if it's elected. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Here's Susanna with the headlines.
Trading on the New Zealand Stock Exchange has finished for the week after a turbulent 4 days marred with cyber attacks. There's still little clarity on who is behind the attacks, which have been overloading the website and market announcement platform. The Gcsp is investigating. The Finance Minister is urging Aucklanders who have symptoms or links to current COVID-19 cases to get tested before the region moves to level 2 on Sunday night. Grant Robertson says this will help Auckland to transition more safely out of lockdown. There are 5 new cases of COVID-19 in the community and 7 in managed isolation today. The Christchurch terrorist did not want to appear in person at his sentencing. Previously suppressed court documents show Brenton Tarrant's counsel had said it would be cost-saving and would avoid the need for secure transfer from Auckland to Christchurch. But Justice Cameron Mander declined, arguing it might have been an attempt by the killer to avoid being held publicly accountable for his offences. Auckland Council has signed its side of an agreement which aims to increase the amount of water it can take from the Waikato River. The agreement does not approve any water consent applications but requires all parties to work together to both ensure the health of the river and that Auckland and Waikato have enough drinking water. Tauranga's Green School says it was not asking for free money when it applied for government funding for its construction project. The $11.7 million shovel-ready project was championed by Green Party co-leader and Associate Finance Minister James Shaw. He is now facing mounting pressure from his party for supporting public investment in a private school. Sir Michael Cullen is throwing his support behind the proposed euthanasia law. The former Labour Deputy Prime Minister was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and secondary cancer in the liver in February. The 75-year-old says it will give people some control over how they die, including himself. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Let's return now to our top story. And the government has called in the Gcsp to help get to the bottom of the cyber attacks on the NZX. The stock exchange has been hit 4 times in as many days, crippling its website and bringing a halt to trading. The Minister in charge of the Gcsp, Andrew Little, joins me now. Good evening, Minister. What can you tell us about what's going on here?
As we know, the NZX website has been the subject of a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack over 4 days now. It caused the NZX to have to suspend trading again today, but they've been able to trade all afternoon. So remedial measures were put in place last night. The Gcsp has been assisting NZX and their service providers to get remedial measures in place and to get the place operating again. This afternoon they've managed to do that. Investigations into the source are ongoing, but DDoS attacks are notoriously difficult to trace back, but that work is ongoing.
OK, a lot of things in there. So you say work is being done and investigation is underway. What clues or ideas do you have in terms of motive and where it's coming from?
None of that at the moment. I mean, these things typically are designed to cause disruption with possibly other kind of collateral objectives involved. DDoS attacks are seldom state-sponsored, but obviously that can't be ruled out. So, look, anything is possible, and it is just arduous, meticulous work to try and work through, a huge volume of network transactions to try and find an ultimate source.
Has there been any communication from the perpetrators, any ransom demand?
I can't go into the context of the total background to it, except to say that this has clearly been designed to cause disruption. It's been repeated over a number of days now. OK, so what exactly is the Gcsp's role here? Well, they operate the National Cyber Security Centre, and they have an extraordinary depth of expertise in the networks and their security, and then working with organisations both public and private to ensure that they're observing the best sort of cybersecurity measures. And so they've been working with NZX, their IT team, their advisors, their service providers to make sure that A, there is remediation, and B, there is a strategy about making sure that they are in a good position to deal with and be resilient against these attacks in the future.
Is the NZX considered to be a critical piece of national infrastructure, and was the Gcsp working with them before this happened?
Well, the Gcsp has been working, certainly since the first incident on Tuesday, has been working with them from the outset, but they've worked with them before. But yes, the NZX is a critical part of our financial services infrastructure. It's an important part of our capital markets, and that was why, as this progressed, it became more of an important issue, which is why the Gcsp continued to work and add resources to assisting NZX.
So was there any chatter that something like this was coming? Had the Gcsp picked up on anything?
No, I mean, the Gcsp is, look, they're not, there's no one that monitors absolutely everything that's going on the internet at any one time. But once NZX was under attack, then they notified the National Cyber Security Centre, which is part of the Gcsp, and the Gcsp became involved at that point.
Understand that regarding monitoring, but several overseas web bulletins have been raising concerns about 2 particular, I suppose, groups of cyber attackers as recently as last week. So did anyone have any clue that this was coming?
Yeah, I think the work of the Gcsp is mainly centred around assisting organisations dealing with malware, the threat of malware being implanted into networks. They don't deal with things like DDoS attacks, which is multiple, huge volume of traffic coming in from co-opted computers from around the world. The best people to deal with that are actually the internet service providers, the ISPs, so the Sparks and the Vodafones and others. It's their networks that are best able to pick up this sort of activity on their networks.
Are you surprised that such a critical piece of our infrastructure was so vulnerable to this kind of attack and seemingly still is?
Look, I think there's something for NZX to reflect on is just their IT architecture and how they're set up. Look, other organisations become victims of DDoS attacks here and around the world. In this day and age, there are measures that can be taken to make organisations resilient to it. And in fact, every organisation in New Zealand, every corporate in New Zealand should be making sure that they are protecting their IT infrastructure against this sort of thing. There's very good guidance and advice from an organisation called CERT.
But would you have expected this organisation to be far more resilient than what it has shown itself to be?
Look, I think we can all see how and ask how is it that an organisation like NZX and the important role that it plays in our capital markets could be effectively brought down 4 days in a row because of something that's in their IT architecture. It's a matter for them, but clearly they are vulnerable and they need to make sure that their systems are protected against this in the future.
Are you aware of any other assets that are under risk right now?
No, not at all.
Have any other threats been made directed at any other businesses?
I'm not aware of any that have been notified to the Gcsp. The Gcsp has just been working with NZX this week.
What is it doing with, say, other critical companies like Fonterra and other assets in light of the fact that we have had this attack and the NZX has seemed to be very vulnerable? Are we circling the wagons around other critical infrastructure?
I mean, Gcsp does work with other organisations, public and private, and of national significance to New Zealand. And I think events like this are a wake-up call to everybody to make sure that their IT architecture and infrastructure is geared up to be able to be resilient against attacks like this. They are a reality of the modern day. There is good guidance on the CERT website, cert.govt.nz. There's good guidance on what corporates should have in place and do to make themselves less vulnerable to these sorts of attacks.
Have you been talking to any other countries or reached out to anyone outside of New Zealand for assistance here?
No, we haven't. I'm not aware that there's been any contact with overseas countries for assistance. The GCSP has been working with the NZX and providers here. Look, the NZX and its service providers may well have got assistance and advice and technical assistance from overseas companies, but in terms of other countries, no.
Is it solved?
Well, NZX has had an afternoon trading with no further disruption this afternoon, and I think there will be work ongoing over the weekend to make sure that everybody better understands what might have happened and to make sure that the protections are in place ready for Monday.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Andrew Little, who is the Minister in charge of the GCSP. Let's head to business news now with Emma Hatton, who joins us from Wellington. Emma, more earnings to report come through over the week. So what do we have today and how's it looking?
Yeah, so believe it or not, Lisa, there were other business news stories today, aside from the NZX, which was, of course, a major one out there. But we did have some earnings results come through. So these came through in the pre-open market announcements. So obviously trading didn't start until 1 o'clock this afternoon, but we did get some announcements through earlier in the morning. One of those was the full year results for the port of Tauranga. And this is the country's biggest port. It had a bit of a hit to its profit. It also, obviously, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, saw a drop in cargo volumes and shipping, so that impacted its profit. It made $90 million compared with just over the $100 million that it made a year ago. Its cargo volumes were down about 8% and the number of ships calling in were down about 10%. So not so bad really for the port, considering the impact that the pandemic did have. And its chief executive said what happened, what helped it weather that period was its diversity of cargo. So it wasn't confined to just a couple of key export markets. For instance, we heard right at the very start, big log jams with logs getting in and out of the country because China closed its factories. It does expect cargo volumes to recover, and it expects dairy and kiwi fruit to lead the way there. So that's what we heard from them. We also heard from Steel and Tube. Result there not so solid. They made a loss of $60 million. That was down from a profit they made last year of $10.4 million. All of that net loss was basically due to one-off costs, so some write-downs, put some money aside for bad debts and some costs for restructuring. It knew it wasn't going to be pretty. Its revenue was hit pretty hard by the lockdown restrictions, and that followed a pretty half first year that it had already had. The industry just wasn't in its favour. Vertical construction activity was down and there wasn't much of a demand for stainless steel. And then the lockdown happened, which is usually a pretty high earning part of the year for it. So had to make some cuts. It closed or consolidated 11 of its branches, and by Christmas that means 20% of its workforce will be reduced by 20%. That's close to 200 jobs. So about half of the staff have already left, and the rest will be gone by the end of the year. Overall, though, the company is pretty pleased with how it's come out the other side. They say trading in the first quarter of the 2021 financial year is strong. It's got a strong balance sheet. Its debt is low, but it is still playing it safe. Did not pay a dividend out to shareholders.
Hey, so what is this warning that's being issued about buy now, pay later products, and what kind of things are we talking about? What kind of products?
Yeah, so these are those lay-by type systems where you pay up front like a quarter of the price and then you pay the rest off over 3 or 4 weeks. And these are available in-store or online. You'll see sort of stickers up on retail shops and as an option to pay if you're online shopping. They're quite, a lot of retailers have picked them up and you can get them for pretty much anything that you buy, either big ticket sort of whiteware items or just, you know, a $20 clothing item from a fashion store. And it's a market that's relatively new to New Zealand. It's only been around for sort of 2-3 years. And, you know, they are better than other lines of credit like credit cards or hire purchase because they don't charge interest, but you do get pinged for late payment fees or default fees or anything like that. So the Commission for Financial Capability is warning that they are starting to see people get themselves into strife through these providers. So one of the reasons is that a lot of people are running multiple providers. So there's a few companies that offer this. So there's like Afterpay, PartPay, OxyPay, Lay-by, there might be a couple of others as well. And these guys don't, you know, they don't talk to each other. You could rack up, you know, even little bits among multiple providers and you'd lose track of how much total debt you've actually got and when the payments are due and things like that. And then if they try and come out of your bank account, you might get pinged for a bank fee if you haven't got the money in there and so on. You can see how it might snowball there. They do run a credit check, but of course a credit check doesn't show what current debt you might have. It only shows how you've gone about paying your past debt. So one of the things that they're warning there is that people aren't thinking about that total debt cost and they're just looking at that upfront cost. So, you know, oh, it's only costing me $10, I'll get something else. Oh, I'll get something else. I'm only paying $30 up front. All of a sudden you've got, you know, a $140 bill or whatever it might be. And they did say they saw more people use these schemes during the first lockdown period. And they do expect when they crunch the numbers, they'll see that more people did start using them as well during this lockdown period in Auckland, because of course you can do online shopping in level 3. And I mean, these schemes are really popular. Afterpay, in its financials, which have just come out this week, it doubled its revenue. It's worth more than $25 billion on the ASX. It's got close to 10 million customers and it's still apparently in its growth phase. So these companies are not going anywhere and they're not bad by any, you know, sort of stretch. Consumers just need to be really smart about how they use them. So that's the warning.
And we did get some trading on the stock exchange today. So what numbers have you got for us?
Yeah, so started trading at about 1 o'clock this afternoon and it was smooth sailing right up until closing. Closed up 40 points, 12,093. Remember our record high is 12,107, so we are really close there. We could hit that next week. The dollar is trading at 66.6 US cents, 91.4 Australian and 50.2 British pence.
Thanks, Emma. That is Emma Hatton joining us from our Wellington studio with business. It is 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. A number of you getting in touch about that funding, $12 million for the Green School in Taranaki. We hope to get to that feedback shortly. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. NZ Blood is stockpiling plasma from recovered COVID-19 patients so it can be used in international clinical trials or more widely if it's proven to be effective as a treatment. This week, the US Food and Drug Administration issued an emergency order for the use of so-called convalescent COVID plasma in hospitalised patients, saying the known and potential benefits of the product outweigh the risks. Convalescent plasma contains antibodies from the infection someone has recently recovered from, and it's been used before against SARS, the flu and other viruses. Chief Medical Officer for NZ Blood, Dr. Sarah Morley, explains exactly what the service is collecting and from whom.
Convalescent plasma is plasma that's collected from someone, usually after an infection. It's usually collected within the first 2 to 3 months after infection, and it picks up from the bloodstream the plasma, which is the yellow liquid part of blood that suspends the blood cells. And in that plasma are antibodies, and so those are proteins that are a specific response to the virus or the infection that went before, and those can be transferred by transfusion back into a new recipient to help their immune response.
So this explains your interest in people who have had COVID-19. Who qualifies to give plasma donations of those patients?
So we have been in contact with COVID patients who had COVID that was proven by a positive swab sample, and the individuals need to have fully recovered at least 28 days before we take any plasma that could be used to treat another individual. But the other thing is, obviously, they go through all of the routine health checks and blood tests that we take for any blood donor to make sure that plasma product is completely safe.
Have you called all of the people in the country who've had COVID asking if they would like to participate in the program?
No, we haven't. So we decided that we would initially, because we started to collect plasma as the outbreak had started to decrease in New Zealand last time during the last lockdown. So we decided that we would contact donors that were previously blood donors and who had tested positive, because they know the routines, we know that they're comfortable with blood donation. So those were the initial contacts that we made. If we find in future that we need more donors, then we will make a wider range of contacts to pick up more individuals who could help us.
So how much of this plasma do you have, the COVID-related stuff?
So right now we have about 20 doses, which would on average treat around 10 patients. We aren't holding a large stock, partly because we haven't had demand yet, but we can bring back the same donors to top up those stocks very quickly, and also we're in a position to contact more donors and collect a lot more very quickly, so we would expect to be able to step that up if it was needed.
So has any of it been used, and how does it get used, and who decides if it gets used?
Yes, at the moment we haven't had any formal requests. How we've set up our program is that clinicians who want to use COVID convalescent plasma as part of one of the several clinical trials that are running to look at treatments for COVID can have access to the plasma in that setting. But we would also allow access outside of the trial after clinical consultation with the intensive care or other doctors looking after patients between ourselves and them, to make sure that we felt that patient was likely to benefit.
Generally speaking, who gets it? Is it for very sick patients with coronavirus?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there's still a lot we don't know about the value and the timing of treatment for COVID patients with plasma. So the trials differ a little bit in when they would include it. For most cases, I would think that the usual approach would come when a patient was deteriorating and looked likely to need intensive care, and that it would be given early in an intensive care course
for patients who seemed to still be deteriorating. But there is a trial going on in the United States which is looking at whether convalescent plasma could work much earlier than that. So patients who are early in their course of COVID or people who've had contact. So, for instance, if you were someone who might be a vulnerable person and you were known to have had a family contact with COVID. So all of those things are still under investigation. And that information and those information and ideas will evolve over time, I think.
So how many clinical trials are there here exactly?
So I'm not aware of any clinical trials that have been specifically designed solely in New Zealand, but there are a number of trials. There are 2 from Australia, 1 from the UK, that are recruiting patients from different intensive care units across the world. And we know that some of our intensive care units in New Zealand want to be in a position to join those trials if they need to.
So at the moment, Doctor, do those international trials or any international organisation like hospital, can they ask you for some of this?
Yes, they can, and we would be expecting that the request would come from the doctors at the hospital treating the patients. If that hospital is enrolled in a trial, then they will be following the protocols of the trial that they are enrolled with. Otherwise, they will have a conversation with us and talk to us about why they need the plasma and how much they need based on the patient's needs. So yes, they are in a position to approach us.
So has any of this COVID plasma from New Zealand gone offshore yet?
No, it hasn't.
And has it been used in a New Zealand patient in New Zealand yet?
No, it hasn't.
So we are just storing this just in case?
That's right. So we started collecting towards the end of the last outbreak, and so none was requested at the time that we started to collect it. We've retained some to make sure that if we had any further outbreaks, we had enough to treat anyone who might benefit from it. And as I say, if we felt that in the future we needed to step up production, we would do so.
I'm just curious, how much of this plasma would you use for a treatment?
One individual plasma treatment is around 200 mils, and most of the trials and studies that have been done are focusing on giving around 400 mils of plasma to the individual patient. But again, that's an area that's under study.
So that's basically like 2 small glasses of water?
Two medium-sized glasses of water, yes, for sure.
And that's New Zealand Blood's Dr. Sarah Morley. Lockdown has inspired many of us to take to the garden, and whilst most of us are happy to harvest anything, an Australian family has taken the opportunity to go one better. Queensland man Jeff Froloff has been in the giant produce game for 30 years and has inspired 4 generations of his family to get into the unusual hobby. But as the ABC's Anna Hartley reports, Jeff's struggle now is to grow a pumpkin weighing more than 300 kilos.
Jeff Froloff loves his pumpkins.
This one a kiss for me?
The farmer's been growing and showing giant Atlantics for decades, with his 2015 entry holding the current Royal Brisbane show record. And 5 years later, the Minden grandfather has finally beaten it, producing a whopping 288 kilogram pumpkin.
I couldn't believe it when we put it on the scale, and I didn't think it was going to go quite that heavy, you know.
But with COVID-19 cancelling country shows across Australia, the giant gourd didn't get its fairy tale ending.
Put a lot into it and that, and you come up with a beauty, and everything's cancelled, and then I defeat it to the cows.
Big fruit and veggies are a family tradition for the Froloffs, with 4 generations competing on the show circuit.
We spend loads of time together.
Yeah, that too.
Have fun.
We have a good banter with each other, like mine's bigger than yours, or I don't think so. Or no, it's really good in that fun. That's what makes it fun.
Jeff Froloff also grew the heaviest watermelon in the Southern Hemisphere last year, weighing more than 100 kilograms.
Extreme gardening. Really it is.
The family hopes more people give growing giant veggies a go. But be warned, the Frolofs are saving the seeds from the record breaker.
He looks good, I'd plant him.
Which they'll plant in the lead up to next year's competition. Australia's heaviest pumpkin was grown in New South Wales in 2015. It weighed about 120 times more than your average grocery store variety, tipping the scales at 743 kilograms. Mr. Froloff says he doesn't need to break national records, just his own.
Hopefully I can get one over 300 kilos next time. I think it would be good.
That is one whopper of a pumpkin for those of you listening who couldn't see the pictures. Absolutely huge. We're getting a lot of feedback from you about funding for this green school in Taranaki. This listener says, big mistake. Money should go to state schools, and I'm a Labour member, they say. Someone else says, let's wait for more detail on the green school. I suspect there is more to come. It doesn't sound like a solid financial decision. Someone else says the grant to the green school is an appalling decision. There is nothing green about this school. It's simply a school for rich people who don't support our education system in New Zealand. How is it going to create 200 jobs? Those are woolly facts, says this listener. And they go on to say that the region as a whole would have benefited if other schools had got the money. Another person says, I'm disgusted and angry at the grant of a large amount of taxpayer money to a private business school. No matter what the good points are, the Greens have lost my vote, they say.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei a tāua tēnei. The government's intelligence agency, the Gcsp, has been called in to investigate the cyber attack on the stock exchange. The NZX has been crippled 4 times in as many days by a distributed denial of service attack, bringing a halt to trading. The Minister, Andrew Little, says progress is being made to solve the problem.
Remedial measures were put in place last night. The Gcsp has been assisting NZX and their service providers to get remedial measures in place and to get the place operating again. This afternoon they've managed to do that.
Andrew Little says DDoS attacks are rarely state-sponsored but can't be ruled out. New figures from the Ministry of Social Development show there hasn't been a big spike in people losing their jobs as wage subsidy payments have ended. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says in the 2 weeks to August the 21st, more than 325,000 jobs came off the wage subsidy. In that same period, just over 6,000 people went on to the benefit or the 12-week COVID income relief payment.
And I think what that reflects is businesses have been adjusting. We did see that very strong period for the economy through late June and into July. And so, it's a good sign for the economy, but I also don't want to diminish the experience of those more than 6,000 people who have moved on to income support. It's tough for them.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson. More than 10,000 vehicles have been turned around at police checkpoints in Auckland during the second COVID lockdown. The police are reminding Aucklanders the city remains under Alert Level 3 restrictions until midnight on Sunday. The Assistant Commissioner Richard Chambers says the police are still manning 13 roadblocks across the north and south of Auckland as strict travel restrictions remain in place. He says close to 250,000 vehicles had been processed through police checkpoints by yesterday, with 10,000 of them turned around. Of the 12 new coronavirus cases today, 5 are linked to the Auckland cluster. The other 7 are returning travellers. Auckland's Mayor says an agreement has been made between parties on the future of the Waikato River. The agreement does not approve any water consent applications, but requires the parties to work together to both ensure the health of the river and ensure Auckland and Waikato have enough drinking water. Phil Goff says the agreement would commit the council to paying for conservation and restoration of the Waikato Awa.
I'm confident that the agreement will be made and that will establish a sustainable relationship for Auckland, the Auckland Council and Watercare, and the 3 groups in the Waikato, the River Authority, the Regional Council and the Waikato Tainui Iwi.
Other parties, including Waikato Tainui Iwi, Waikato River Authority and Waikato Regional Council, are yet to formally sign. The US President has formally accepted the Republican Party's nomination for a second term in office. The BBC's Jane O'Brien was listening to Donald Trump's speech outside the White House as a firework display spelled out the words Trump 2020.
I am struggling to hear anything else above the noise of the fireworks going off, using not just the White House as a backdrop for a political party rally, but also the Washington Monument on the National Mall, the hallowed ground of American history. This is quite an extraordinary scene, but President Trump, in that almost an hour-long speech, has set out his vision for America.
Jane O'Brien reporting. Sir Michael Cullen wants people to have the option to die with dignity if they are suffering from a terminal illness. The former Labour Deputy Prime Minister has thrown his support behind the law. The End of Life Choice Act will become law if more than half of voters tick yes in the referendum to be held at the general election. Sir Michael was diagnosed with terminal cancer in February and believes the Act will give many people peace of mind.
The bill, properly I think, has got a lot of safeguards in it to prevent the things that most people are worried about. That doesn't affect people whose moral position is that any way of taking one's own life or assisting somebody else to do what they want is morally repugnant to them. All I say to those people is I understand that, I understand your views, I respect your views. All that I and other people are asking is please respect my views.
Sir Michael Cullen. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. All Black Dylan Hunt will return home to Auckland to join the Blues in Super Rugby after 4 seasons with the Highlanders. The North Harbour captain has made 2 appearances for the All Blacks with his debut in Japan in 2018. Hunt, who will play for the South Island in next week's Inter-Island fixture, joined the Highlanders in 2017, playing 41 games. Meanwhile, Canterbury scored 6 tries in the opening half an hour of the Ranfurly Shield defence against North Otago and Christchurch this afternoon. The home side eventually ran out 71-7 winners at Rugby Park. North Otago have challenged Canterbury for the Shield on 4 previous occasions, and the closest they got was a 14-0 loss in 1971. The Auckland Tuatara are optimistic there will be a New Zealand hub for the upcoming Australian Baseball League season. Pending government clearance, up to 4 teams will be based here for 24 games each during January. Tuatara boss Reagan Wood says while they haven't got any exemptions yet, both they and the ABL are pushing ahead.
We're treating it as we've got the green light. I think from a planning point of view and a preparation, you've got to treat that it's all go, as opposed to going, well, yeah, we could be, should be, maybe, but this COVID looks dreadful. I'm like, well, let's just rip into it, and then we'll just back ourselves off and start working on Plan B in November when it looks like it's just not going to happen.
Reagan Wood. That's the news.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
To hear the strongest possible sentence be handed down, it somehow just felt just.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
It has been absolutely difficult for reporters, but it simply doesn't compare to the pain that has been endured by the victims and survivors.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Partly cloudy with a few showers in Northland. Generally fine elsewhere with the odd shower at times, especially tomorrow afternoon. Waikato to Taranaki including Taupo. Cloudy periods and showers. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington. Fine spells and isolated showers. Gisborne to Wairarapa. Also Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago excluding Clutha. Fine weather with high cloud at times. Norwesterly gales in exposed places tomorrow for Canterbury. Southland and Clutha, high cloud increasing, then rain tonight. A few showers tomorrow and westerly gales in exposed places. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers, heavy in Fiordland tonight. Chatham Islands, fine spells and the odd shower. RNZ National. It's 7.5 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna, and welcome back. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Green Party co-leader James Shaw is facing criticism from party members for supporting nearly $12 million in funding for a privately owned green school in Taranaki. It flies in the face of the party's policy to not publicly fund private schools. James Shaw is under mounting pressure and is urgently working to find a solution ahead of an online meeting with members tonight. Catherine Delahunty is the party's former education spokesperson, and she joins me now. Good evening, Catherine. What's the problem with this?
Oh, kia ora, Lisa. I think the problem
was pretty clearly explained by you in the intro, that we have a policy, which I had a lot to do with developing over 9 years, that we don't fund private schools, that we put our resources, the state's resources, into the quality public education where it's so badly needed for so many of our young people. And although this project money came out of the Provincial Growth Fund, for infrastructure, schools are infrastructure. And I think that it would be great if James, as Minister, who made this mistake, owned it and did his best to make sure that the money went to the people that actually need it.
How strongly do you feel about this?
Oh, I feel very strongly about this. Public quality education took a total bashing under the national government and has not yet recovered. They brought in national centres, charter schools, and underfunding like we've never seen before. And the public system is, as you will have seen in the media today, there are teachers in Taranaki very, very upset. And I must say, I do feel for them who have high needs kids, broken classrooms, mouldy rooms, and for them there's just no logic in government putting $11 million into expanding a private school, which should not be funded by the state. If these people want to do a school, whether it's a green or a purple school or whatever kind of school, that's fine, but they need to pay for it themselves.
Are you putting ideology ahead of jobs? Because James Shaw's press release says it will secure 200 jobs and will contribute, because the school is expected to expand with this construction, will contribute $43 million each year for the local economy. What about the local economy and protecting people's financial future as well?
Well, I think that investing in building programs for public schools provides exactly the same jobs and provides exactly the same money into the local community. And I'm sure now that this issue has arisen, that the schools of the Taranaki area could come up with a number of projects. I think part of the problem is that the Provincial Growth Fund has been like a lolly scramble where a group of ministers have got in a room and looked at thousands of competing bids. It's not the best way to do it. And I think that James, as Minister, has become isolated from the party to some degree in the sense that his instincts didn't tell him that this was never going to fly with the Green Party and that our policies are never to fund private schools, because he's been trying to find jobs that are alternatives to oil and gas in Taranaki, and we get that, but this is not it.
Has he let you and others down?
I think that you could say that. I don't think he deliberately was trying to let people down. I think he made a big mistake, and I hope he comes out and says it's a mistake and rectifies it however he can, because there's a lot at stake in terms of the credibility of our education policy, which is very dear to a lot of people's hearts. We've had a proud tradition of challenging National over their destructive approaches to.
But this is a government decision, Catherine, made by a Labour-led government supported by the Green Party. So we're not talking about National Party policy. We're talking about a decision within a government which the Greens are supporting and is led by Labour. So they said double thumbs up to it.
I know, and I don't get it. And I only raised National because National did the damage in the last 9 years. So the last thing that a Labour Green government should do is any more damage. And that means all resources should be focused on rebuilding infrastructure and creating jobs in a way that is actually just and equitable, including and especially in education. So it doesn't add up, and it needs to be fixed.
So have you had a conversation directly with James Shaw?
No, I have attempted to talk to a few people in the party, and some have contacted me, because I'm not active in the party in the same way as I used to be, and I'm not working on the election campaign in any form. I'm now independent. And so I haven't talked to them, but I know that they'll be very, very busy looking for a solution, and I hope they find one, and I hope that this can be a very positive lesson for the caucus and the ministers. Do not ignore party policy, and do not get so caught up that you can't see the connections and you can't join the dots around things like jobs and education.
When you say you want James Shaw to own this and to fix it, what do you mean exactly? How can he fix it?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not in the position. I'm not in the room, so I don't know how they are working on this money. But I do believe that when mistakes are made, it's important to go and say. Ideally, he would go and say to the school, "I'm really, really sorry, but we can't actually do this because it's outside our brief."
So withdraw funding is what you're saying, Catherine. That would be the best outcome in your view.
Yeah, from my point of view, it would be the best outcome. Withdraw the funding and then let the public quality education in Taranaki have access to the fund. That's what I would do, but I'm not sure what hoops they would have to jump through to achieve that goal. So I'll be very interested because I know that they're working hard on a solution. I'd be very interested to see that solution. But step one is that he admits that this is a mistake and it should never have happened and that we don't support private schools. What if he doesn't admit that it's a mistake? Well, if he doesn't, then his party pays for that with the credibility of their position on education, and that would be very, very sad. And I don't think that's how the party feels about education. And I'm looking forward to that. They're having a call tonight to talk to the membership. I'm looking forward to hearing the constructive outcome from that, because when you make a mess, you fix it up. Unless you don't want to fix it up because you actually believe in elite private school funding. But there's nothing in our policies that says that. So James Shaw's gone rogue, has he? I don't know. I'm not close enough to Parliament to know exactly what happened in the room. But in your observation, Catherine, given that he is supporting this, the press release came out under his name, has he gone rogue? Oh, well, I think rogue is a little bit too colourful. I think what he's done is tried to focus on climate and forgotten about joining the dots. And also, I think that some of his instincts are more conservative than I personally believe in. I would never countenance anything that had the word private next to it, because I know that in education that they don't need our resources. We need to give it to kids. So, I hope that he fixes this. And I hope that he listens to his party and does the right thing and does his absolute best to reassure teachers. Yeah, as it stands, is this a vote loser at this point? If there's nothing done about it, it's going to have an impact because people really, really care about public education. So you think it's going to lose the Green Party votes if James Shaw, in your words, doesn't put it right? I don't know how many people vote on education. We're always told it's a lot, but if you don't fix this, then there is potentially an impact on electoral impact. So it's serious and it needs to be dealt to. Appreciate your time this evening. That is Catherine Delahunty, who is, she was the Green Party's former education spokesperson and not happy at all with this decision to fund a private school in Taranaki. As we mentioned before, we did ask the Minister, James Shaw, on the program this evening. He declined that invitation. We have this statement that says, over the past 24 hours, I have discussed the government's decision to support a shovel-ready construction project at the Green School in Taranaki with the PPTA and NZEI and the Principals Association. I have also received messages from concerned members of the public, seen the commentary on social media and heard from teachers, principals and parents who are disappointed by our decision. I have listened to these concerns and I am working to find a solution. However, I cannot say anything more about that right now. And that was a statement from the Minister, James Shaw. The National Party has pledged it will keep the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter running for at least 5 more years if it's elected in October. The clock is already ticking down to the closure of the smelter near Bluff after owner Rio Tinto released plans to shut it next August, ending its contract with Meridian Energy. But National Party leader Judith Collins told an enthusiastic Southland crowd she's confident a commercial deal could be reached, preventing more than 2,000 job losses across the region. Tess Brunton filed this report.
Juncker Engineering has been supplying products and services to the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter since 1994. It was there at its Invercargill head office National Party leader Judith Collins unveiled her vision for the smelter.
Our aim is to create a commercially viable result that will keep the smelter in operation for at least the next 5 years, while preparing Southland to lessen the severity of any potential closure. We believe a commercial deal could be reached.
She promised a national government will expedite negotiations between Rio Tinto, power companies and Transpower to ensure better transmission prices so the smelter can commit beyond its hard close date next August. Her other pledges include upgrading the smelter's technology to boost available electricity, improving Southland's internet and accelerating investment in Transpower's transmission lines. In exchange for the deal, she says Rio Tinto will need to show how it will clean up the site and deal with waste when it closes. Deputy Leader Jerry Brownlee says the company is willing to consider negotiating, but he wouldn't be pushed on financial figures.
Know when to hold them and know when to fold them. So,
We've got to be very careful on that. But
we do have to be careful about that.
Yeah.
New Zealand Untitled Smelters have put some numbers on the table, and we've considered those and have decided that there is a strong basis for negotiation.
When asked if there's a fallback plan, Judith Collins says there is, but she wasn't going to reveal it. She says she is focused on getting to work on negotiations straight away, if elected.
Well, as soon as we're there, really, as soon as we're sworn in, I think that's really important, that people here need certainty, and the closer we can do it straight after the election, should we be privileged enough to lead the next government, we'll get straight on to the job.
Gore District Mayor Tracy Hicks says losing the smelter would be devastating.
It's really going to take a strong government to intervene. They've given a signal today that they want to do that. I wish them well. It's been a challenge for many years with a variety of governments, and we haven't really got a lot of progress. So I've got high hopes, but we also got a commitment today that they would intervene in other ways if that was going to take longer than originally planned.
He says the National Party's plan is a positive step forward and recognises high transmission costs as one of the key barriers in negotiations.
The industry that is built up around the smelter and probably equates to about a third of the industry and the economic base of Southland. So it is significant for us. So we've got to pull out all the stops and do everything we possibly can to make sure that we continue to have TUI operating as long as it possibly can be.
Tracy Hicks thinks a partnership between the government and the regions will be key. Invercargill City Mayor Sir Tim Shadbolt is pleased with the pledge, even as the clock ticks to the smelter's planned closure next August.
It's challenging, but it always has been when it comes to negotiations between the smelter and the electricity company. But this is a great time. People are positive now. They're looking for new projects that they can get behind, and this will certainly benefit from any support they can possibly get.
So Tim Shadbolt says halting the closure would give Southland more time to kickstart other industries.
We realise that the smelter will not last forever, but we don't want money, we don't want subsidies, we don't want any of that. We just want fair pricing.
But Southland's leaders aren't putting their eggs in one basket, saying they're keen to hear from each political party about their plans for the smelter. In Invercargill for Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, TNA.
It is 22 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A fifth day of demonstrations following the police shooting of Jacob Blake has wound down, with little of the violence and clashes that have been seen this week in the city of Kenosha. Meanwhile, playoff basketball games in the NBA have been boycotted and suspended for a second straight day, while other major leagues like baseball and ice hockey have followed. CNN's Omar Jimenez has this report.
There's 7 shots now heard throughout the world as people from politicians to athletes are fed up with what's now become an all too familiar story. The NBA is now set to resume play later this week after postponing their playoffs for days in solidarity with Jacob Blake. The WNBA joining the NBA in postponing games that were set to be played tonight, and several NFL teams canceling their practices today to show support.
They kind of felt helpless. They felt like they wanted to do something. They felt like they weren't a part of it, like they were being protected from what everyone else in the world is seeing. And so I think the fact that you had everyone on the campus, it has to be the perfect storm. It's a pandemic. It's a bubble.
But in Kenosha, a community has been dealing with pain and even violence on an almost nightly basis since Blake was shot. Wednesday, police arrested 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse and charged him with first-degree intentional homicide after a night where 2 people were killed and a third person was injured. His social media portrays him as someone who loved guns, police, and the president.
This president gets it done!
Even posting a TikTok from one of President Trump's Iowa rallies in January. It's not clear if that or support for Blue Lives Matter played into his alleged actions. A post to a Snapchat account believed to belong to Rittenhouse appears to show him on Tuesday with a rifle near the scene of the protests. Thursday, nearly all of the local leadership held a press conference, but didn't add any major new details and shuffled out without taking a single question. That shooting came 3 nights after Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back by Kenosha police officer Rustin Shasky, a 7-year veteran with the department.
All involved law enforcement officers are fully cooperating with DCI during the investigation, and the involved officers have been placed on administrative leave. As I said, this is an ongoing investigation.
The Wisconsin Department of Justice releasing new details about the initial call for officers Sunday that a woman claimed her boyfriend was there when he wasn't supposed to be and wouldn't leave.
Complainant says Jacob Blake isn't supposed to be there, and he took the complainant's keys and is refusing to give them back.
Not long after that is when officers arrive on the scene. Investigators say Jacob Blake admitted to having a knife in his possession, but would not say when exactly he had it. A knife was recovered from the floorboard on the driver's side of the vehicle, but it was unclear if officers were aware of it at the time.
And that was CNN's Omar Jimenez there. Resilience has been a valuable commodity over the past 6 months, and for the New Zealand wheelchair rugby community, there's been no shortage of positivity and ability to get through in the unprecedented circumstances created by COVID-19. Their qualities the national team are drawing on as they work towards next year's Paralympic Games in Japan. Sports reporter Clay Wilson and camera operator Dan Cook caught up with the team just before lockdown.
Keeping their wheels turning. COVID-19 might have put the brakes on their Paralympic preparations, but the Wheel Blacks won't let it bring them to a halt. Cody Everson says he and his teammates have a perspective which allows them to roll with the punches presented by a global pandemic.
For a lot of us guys who are in chairs, we've gone through an accident and we've spent a lot of time in hospital, so we're used to, in a way, not something getting taken away from us, but being isolated and having to take a step back from life in a way.
The team was able to make the most of the days free of community transmission, but the resurgence of COVID means after training together for the first time in 6 months, squad members are on their own again. The impact of that will be limited, with veteran squad member Robbie Hewitt saying there's been a lot of hard work done by strength and conditioning coach Jan Rue.
He's sort of rejigged our programs to suit the individual, so he asked for what resources we've had, and we've just worked around that because obviously, not being able to get to the gym or get to see the fellas and push yourself, and we've used a whole lot of technology and just being really resourceful.
That solo training will continue until the country is back to level 1. The risks at any level above that are too high, with around half the squad having compromised respiratory systems because of a lack of core muscle function. Coach Greg Mitchell says the uncertainty created by COVID means staying as nimble as possible.
It's a case of, as part of the staff and the coach is trying to plan to know that you've got plan B, because people don't want to turn up and go, oh, what do we do now? They want to know that there's things there. So there's a lot goes on behind the scenes to make sure that we've got those A, Bs and Cs all set up and ready to go.
It's a level of planning driven by the fact the Tokyo Paralympics are now less than a year away, and also by their determination to ensure the Wheel Blacks' first appearance at the Games since 2008 is a successful one.
Definitely out there to win games. We're not going to make up numbers. No one does. If you go to the Paralympics to make up numbers, find a new sport.
While their ability to succeed in Tokyo is being impacted at the moment, COVID hasn't been all bad news for the team. The Games were delayed until 2021 because of the pandemic, and Cody Everson says the Wheel Blacks are happy to wait.
We're such a young team, so another year for us is amazing. It's going to give us the best opportunity to go to Paris and not take part, compete, and that's the main goal. We want to compete with these big teams.
Greg Mitchell says performing well includes not holding anything back when it comes to the physical side of the sport.
Too right. I mean, it's Tana Umanga all over it, is it? No, it's not tiddlywinks out here. Part of the job of the game is to smash people out of their chair. You don't go in there and just timidly touch someone. You need to go out there and you physically impose yourself on them. And we have guys in our team that's their job. They're big guys, they hit hard.
By doing just that, the current players hope they will show the Wheelbacks are heading back to their glory days, when they won gold at the 2004 Paralympics in Athens. Robbie Hewitt says the squad are desperate to return the 10th ranked Kiwi side to the top of the international game.
Yes, we're proud people. We play, a high performance sport. We're proud of that. We want to achieve great things. So it's definitely a privilege and a sense of pride to not only be able to do it for myself, but my family, our people that support us, the community back home, all that sort of stuff plays a big part.
The Wheelblacks are determined COVID-19 won't stop them moving forward. For Checkpoint, Clay Wilson.
And before we go, let's get to some of your feedback. It has been flooding in about this funding for the Green School and a lot of you not happy at all. This person says appalling decision to fund a private school when there are so many public schools that desperately need infrastructure upgrades. Overcrowded, cold, leaking public schools are crying out for property upgrades, and yet here we are funding an expensive elite school. Morally and ethically wrong, they say, and they go on to say it shows how out of touch James Shaw is with his supporters, or at least his now non-supporters. Winnie says, I'm a Green Party member, horrified about this decision regarding supporting the Green School. However, I will, of course, still be voting for the Greens. There is simply no other party that works so hard for green and social issues, says Winnie. Rob, on the other hand, reckons this Green School, isn't it meant for overseas students? This seems to be far-fetched to me. I believe if this money goes to a private school, it will be the death knell for the Greens, and that's unfortunate, says Rob. And someone else says funding for the private Green School of $11 million just beggars belief. The school is a privately owned business whose shareholders have just had an $11 million windfall from taxpayers. Thank you so much for your feedback and joining us this evening. Don't forget you can catch up on all our stories, particularly the video ones online. Do have a wonderful weekend, particularly if you're counting down the hours in Auckland to Alert Level 2.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Minister in charge of the Gcsp, Andrew Little, says investigators are looking at all possible avenues in relation to the continued cyber attacks on the stock exchange. The police have turned around 10,000 vehicles at checkpoints in Auckland during the second coronavirus lockdown. The end of the wage subsidy hasn't resulted in a big spike in people losing their jobs. Auckland Council has signed its side of an agreement that aims to increase the amount of water it can take from the Waikato River. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, the late Dave McCartney is our Friday Night Live act. Comedian Alice Snedden selects the mixtape. Country Life returns to the Port Hills 2.5 years after the devastating fires of 2017. It seems the plant life is making a comeback too. And because we're going to be wearing them quite a lot over the coming weeks, if we are not already, we've got a